orc woman was left to starve, until a human lumberjack found and saved her. Some people go into the woods to find themselves. Declan Moss went there to lose himself, and for 15 years it worked beautifully. No neighbors asking questions, no faces that reminded him of faces he'd lost, no children laughing in ways that made his chest feel like someone had reached in and squeezed. Just trees. Trees didn't judge. Trees didn't die screaming. Trees just were, which was exactly what Declan wanted to be. Just existing, not living. That required too much, but existing in a way that didn't hurt quite as much as remembering did. His cabin sat 3 miles deep into the northern forest, far enough that even hunters avoided the area. The kind of place where snow fell so thick in winter that the world disappeared into white silence, where wolves howled conversations that echoed through the valley, and the only human sound was the rhythmic bite of Declan's axe into wood. Chop, breathe, chop, breathe. A meditation of violence that kept his hands busy and his mind blessedly empty. He was 38 years old and looked 50. Grief ages you faster than time ever could. His hair had gone gray at the temples first, then spread like frost across a window until even his beard carried more silver than brown. The scar above his left eyebrow, a gift from a falling branch 5 winters back, had healed crooked, giving his face a permanent look of skeptical evaluation, as if he was constantly assessing the world and finding it wanting, which, to be fair, he was. The morning it happened started like every other morning in the past 5,000 mornings. Wake up. Don't think about her laugh. Stoke the fire. Don't think about his wife's hands kneading bread. Boil water. Don't think about how his daughter used to steal sips of his tea when she thought he wasn't looking. Put on boots. Don't think about the tiny boots that used to sit beside them. Grab the axe. Don't think. Just don't think. The forest was doing that thing it did in late autumn, preparing for death with dignity. Leaves fell in slow spirals, gold and crimson and burnt orange, carpeting the ground in a quilt of endings. The air had that particular bite that warned of coming snow, sharp enough to sting the lungs, but not quite cold enough to freeze breath into visible ghosts. Declan breathed it in deep. Cold air was good. Cold air kept you focused on the present, on the now, on the next step, the next swing, the next tree that needed felling. He was 3 miles from the cabin, marking timber near the old game trail when he saw it. Green. Not tree green, not moss green, not any green that belonged in a forest preparing for winter's white shroud. Orc green. The kind of green that even after 15 years of isolation, even after convincing himself he'd left that part of his life behind, even after promising himself he was done with anything that wasn't trees and silence and survival, that green still made his blood run cold and hot at the same time, made his hand tighten on the axe handle, made his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. She was slumped against a boulder near the trail, half covered in fallen leaves like the forest was already trying to bury her. At first Declan thought she might be dead. Then he saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest, barely breathing, dying, but not dead yet. An orc woman. Armor that looked like it had seen better decades, leather and metal that had been high quality once but was now scarred, dented, broken in places. Her skin was the deep green of pine needles, darker than most orcs he'd seen. Black hair, long and matted with sweat and dirt, fell across a face that even unconscious looked carved from stone. Proud, hard, the kind of face that didn't ask for mercy because it had stopped expecting any. Her wrists bore marks, fresh ones, the kind of marks left by iron shackles that had been on too long and removed recently. Her ankles, too, and around her neck, wrapped 3 times and tied with a knot that looked deliberately complicated, was a rope, not tight enough to strangle, just tight enough to humiliate. The orc equivalent of a scarlet letter, a mark of shame. She'd been cast out. Declan stood there, axe in hand, and tried to figure out why he hadn't already walked away. Tried to figure out why his feet seemed to have forgotten how to turn around. Tried to figure out why looking at this dying orc woman made him think of that day 15 years ago when he'd come home to find his entire life reduced to ash and blood and silence. Orcs had done that. Orcs had taken everything that mattered and ground it into the dirt like it was nothing. Like his wife was nothing. Like his 8-year-old daughter was nothing. Like 15 years of building a life, a home, a family. Like all of it was just kindling for their war fires. He should walk away. He had every reason in the world to walk away. He had 15 years of solitude that proved he was good at walking away. This wasn't his problem. This wasn't his species. This wasn't his concern. The orc woman's eyes opened. Just a crack. Just enough for Declan to see that they were amber. The color of honey held up to sunlight. The color of the tea his wife used to make with wildflowers. The color of, stop, don't think, don't compare, don't humanize. But those eyes found his face, and something happened in them. Not fear. She was too far gone for fear. Not hope either. She was too far gone for that too. Just recognition. The look of someone seeing another person who understood what it meant to be left behind. To be deemed not worth keeping. She tried to speak. Her mouth moved, cracked lips splitting, but no sound came out except a wheeze that sounded like it hurt. Then her eyes closed again. Not death, just the body shutting down everything non-essential to squeeze out a few more hours of not quite dead. Declan stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The forest was very quiet. Even the birds had shut up, as if they were waiting to see what the human would do. Walk away and let nature take its course? Or do something monumentally stupid? Damn it, Declan said to no one, to the trees, to the universe that kept putting impossible choices in front of people who just wanted to be left alone. Damn it all to hell. He set down his axe. Carefully. The way you set down a weapon when you're about to do something that goes against every survival instinct you have. Then he bent down, worked his arms under the orc woman's shoulders and knees, and lifted. She was lighter than she should have been. An orc warrior, even a female one, should have weight, muscle, the heft of someone built for combat. But starvation does terrible things to bodies, makes them hollow, makes them feel like you're carrying a shell of a person instead of the person themselves. Declan adjusted his grip, settled her weight across his shoulders in a fireman's carry, and started walking. 3 miles back to the cabin. 3 miles carrying someone who represented everything he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. 3 miles wondering if this was mercy or madness. Probably both. The walk back felt longer than 3 miles had any right to feel. Every step was a negotiation between his body, which was strong enough from years of chopping wood, and his mind, which was screaming increasingly creative reasons why this was the worst decision he'd made since deciding to keep living after everyone he loved had died. She's going to wake up and kill you. She's going to die in your cabin, and then what? She's going to bring her clan down on your head. She's going to... Shut up, Declan told his mind. Just shut up and walk. By the time he reached the cabin, his shoulders were burning and his lungs were doing that thing where they reminded him he was 38, not 28. He kicked the door open, not locked because who was going to rob someone 3 miles into the woods, and carried the orc woman inside. The cabin was small. 1 room, bed in the corner, fireplace on the opposite wall, table and 2 chairs that he'd made himself, shelves with supplies, hooks with tools, everything in its place because order was control and control was sanity. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, the bed he'd slept in alone for 15 years, the bed where he'd taught himself not to reach for someone who wasn't there anymore. And now there was an orc woman in it, unconscious and dying, and Declan had approximately 0 idea what to do next. First things first, the rope around her neck. He cut it off with his hunting knife, careful not to nick her skin. The skin underneath was raw, rubbed bloody in places. She'd been wearing this rope for days at least, maybe weeks. Orc punishment was creative in its cruelty. Next, water. He had a bucket by the door, filled from the stream that ran 50 yards from the cabin. He dipped a cloth in the cold water, squeezed out the excess, and pressed it to her cracked lips. Nothing. She didn't respond. So he did what you do with hypothermia victims. He dripped small amounts of water into her mouth, waited for reflexive swallowing, repeated. After the 3rd drip, she swallowed. After the 7th, her throat moved on its own, trying to pull in more. After the 10th, her eyes flickered open again, those amber eyes that made him think of things he'd promised not to think about. Don't try to talk, Declan said. His voice sounded strange. He hadn't spoken to another person in months. Elder Constance had stopped by last spring, nagged him about isolating himself, left some supplies and a lecture, and departed. That had been the last conversation. His voice had gotten rusty. You're dehydrated, starving. If you try to talk, you'll just hurt yourself worse. The orc woman blinked at him. Slow, processing, trying to figure out if this was real, or if dying had come with hallucinations of enemy species offering kindness. I'm going to give you broth, Declan continued, moving to the fireplace where a pot of rabbit stew had been simmering since morning. He'd learned to cook for one in portions that lasted days. Waste not, Want not. He ladled out some of the liquid, no chunks, nothing solid yet, and brought it back to the bed. Small sips. Your stomach's forgotten what food is. Too much too fast, and you'll vomit it right back up. He helped her sit up. She weighed nothing, bones wrapped in skin, wrapped in shame, and held the bowl to her lips. She drank. Not desperately, carefully, like someone who'd been through this before. Who knew the rhythm of recovery from starvation? How long? She rasped after the third sip. Her voice was rough as tree bark dragged across stone. How long what? How long? Since they left me. Declan looked at her wrists. The scabs were old enough to have started healing. The rope burns on her neck were deep enough to suggest weeks, not days. The weight loss was severe enough to suggest even longer. Month and a half, he said. Maybe 2. You didn't count? Stopped counting, she wheezed. When I realized, counting made it worse. Made me hope someone would come back. Hope is poison when you're dying. There was something too practiced about that philosophy. Too resigned. Like she'd spent a lot of time thinking about how hope worked and how to kill it efficiently. Rest, Declan said, because he didn't know what else to say. Because talking to this orc woman felt like standing on a frozen lake, never sure if the next step would hold or if he'd plunge through into water cold enough to stop hearts. I'll bring you more broth in an hour. Why? The word came out bitter and confused. Why what? Why help me? You're human. She gestured at herself, at the green skin, at everything that marked her as other. We're enemies, have been for longer than you've been alive. So why? It was a good question. Declan wished he had a good answer. Wished he had any answer that didn't make him sound like a sentimental fool or a man with a death wish. Because, he said finally, settling on the truth because lies took too much energy. Leaving you there to die felt worse than bringing you here might turn out to be. The orc woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes again, and Declan couldn't tell if that was acceptance or exhaustion. He went outside. Chopped wood he didn't need. Let the physical rhythm empty his mind of questions he couldn't answer. Let the forest absorb the screaming voice in his head that kept asking what the hell he thought he was doing. When he came back inside 3 hours later, she was still asleep, still breathing, still alive despite her body's best efforts to shut down. He brought more broth, woke her gently, fed her slowly, put her back to sleep. Repeat. It became a routine. For 3 days, he barely slept. Every few hours, he'd check on her. Still breathing. Bring water. Bring broth. Bring eventually some actual food once her stomach remembered how to digest. The orc woman didn't talk much. Partly because talking hurt. Partly because what was there to say. Thank you for not letting me die felt inadequate. Why are you doing this felt too complicated. So they existed in mostly silence, and Declan found it oddly comfortable. He'd gotten good at silence. On the 4th day, she sat up on her own. On the 5th day, she ate solid food without vomiting. On the 6th day, she spoke in full sentences that didn't sound like gravel grinding against gravel. My name, she said, is Valkyria Flintborn, daughter of Mograth Flintborn, warrior of the Iron Peak clan, or, I was, before. Declan was repairing a chair leg at the table. He didn't look up. Before what? Before I was accused of cowardice in battle. Before I was stripped of rank and honor. Before they tied me up, carried me 3 days into human territory, and left me to die. Her voice was flat, empty, the way people sound when they're reciting facts that happened to someone else. When the pain is too big to feel all at once, so you portion it out in doses. Standard punishment for warriors who shame their clan. Death by exposure in enemy lands. If you die, you prove you were weak. If you survive and return, you've redeemed yourself through suffering. Except surviving is statistically unlikely, so it's really just slow execution with extra steps. Were you? Declan asked. The chair leg was splitting. He'd have to replace it entirely. Was I what? A coward in battle? Valkyria laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who'd asked themselves that question approximately 10,000 times, and still wasn't sure of the answer. I don't know, she said. I froze. We were raiding a human settlement. Nothing personal, just clan politics and resource management. And I saw this child, human child, maybe 7 years old, standing in the doorway of a burning building, screaming for her mother. And I just stopped. Couldn't move, couldn't fight, couldn't do what I was trained to do. My brothers in arms had to pull me back while the humans regrouped and ambushed us. 3 orcs died because I froze. She stared at her hands. They were shaking slightly. Muscle memory of shame. So yeah, maybe I was a coward. Or maybe I finally saw what we actually were. What I actually was. A monster setting fire to homes and killing families for clan honor. Which is a very pretty word for conquering and theft. Declan set down the chair leg. Carefully. The way you set down things when your hands want to throw them. I had a daughter, he said. He hadn't planned to say it. The words just came out, bypassing the filter he'd built over 15 years. 8 years old. Blonde hair she got from her mother. Laugh that sounded like bells. Used to follow me everywhere asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly south? Why do you have to chop so much wood? Just constant questions. Drove me crazy. In the best way. He could feel Valkyria's eyes on him, but didn't turn to meet them. 15 years ago, I went to town for supplies. 2-day trip. When I came back, my cabin, my old cabin, not this one, was ash. My wife was dead. My daughter was dead. Orc raid. War party passing through. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong species. His voice stayed level through practice and willpower. I found my daughter's body near the tree line. She'd tried to run, didn't make it far. The silence that followed was the heavy kind. The kind that pressed down on your chest and made breathing feel like work. I'm sorry, Valkyria said quietly. Don't be. You didn't do it. My people did it. My people probably did similar things to your people, Declan said. Maybe not my hands, but human hands. Human raids on orc settlements. Human soldiers burning orc homes. That's how war works. Everyone's the victim. Everyone's the monster. Depends on which side of the blade you're standing on. He finally turned to look at her. She looked stronger than she had 6 days ago. Color returning to the green. Eyes less hollow. Body remembering how to be a body instead of a skeleton waiting to happen. Why? She asked. Same question as before. But this time she meant something different. This time she was asking, why would you help me, knowing what you know? Declan thought about the carved wooden rabbit in his pocket. The one he'd carried every day for 15 years. The one he'd made for his daughter 3 weeks before she died. The one he couldn't put down because putting it down meant accepting she was gone. Meant accepting that moving forward was possible. Meant accepting that the past didn't have to define every future moment. Because, he said, when I saw you dying in the snow, all I could think was, she's someone's daughter too. Maybe someone's sister. Maybe someone's friend. And leaving her there to die wouldn't bring my family back. Wouldn't change anything. Would just add one more death to a world that already has too many. Valkyria stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once. Slow. The acknowledgement of someone who understood that mercy wasn't weakness. It was the hardest kind of strength. Thank you, she said, for seeing me as someone's daughter, instead of just an orc. Don't thank me yet, Declan said. You're alive, but you're still in human territory with no clan to go back to. Though what happens next part of this hasn't gotten any easier. He was right about that. 2 weeks later they came. Declan was outside splitting logs. Wood didn't chop itself, and winter was coming with the inevitability of debt collectors, when he heard the horns. Orc war horns. The kind that echoed through valleys and made deer run and told everyone within 5 miles that something large and angry and green was approaching with purpose. Inside the cabin, Valkyria's face went white, which on green skin was more of a pale green turning gray situation, but the meaning was clear. They found me, she said. Not scared, resigned, like she'd been expecting this. My clan. They found me. I thought they wanted you dead. They did. But they also don't want the humiliation of a marked coward surviving in enemy lands. Makes them look weak, like their punishments don't stick. She moved to the window, looked out at the forest line. They'll want to finish it, publicly. Prove their justice is absolute. Declan set down his axe, picked up his hunting bow. It wasn't much against orc war parties, but it was better than harsh language and wishful thinking. How many? He asked. If they sent a proper hunting party? 6 to 8. Enough to handle a rogue warrior. Not enough to risk a larger confrontation with human settlements if things go wrong. And if I told them you died already? That they can take your body and go? Valkyria turned from the window. Her amber eyes held something new. Not hope. Hope was dangerous. But possibility. The faint outline of maybe. They'd never believe it without proof. And even if they did believe it, she gestured at herself. At the health she'd regained. At the living body that clearly wasn't a corpse. I'm standing right here, alive. Which means someone helped me. which means you're a collaborator, which means you're as guilty as I am. Guilty of what? Breaking their law, interfering with clan justice. They'll demand recompense. Either you hand me over, or they take you instead. Or both. Declan considered this. Weighed options, calculated odds, came to the conclusion that math was never his strong suit anyway. Third option, he said. I tell them to leave, both of you. That's not how orc law works. Well, I'm not orc, so their law can go to hell. He moved to the door, bow in hand. Stay inside. Don't come out unless I specifically say your name. If things go bad, there's a back window. Run east. Village is 5 miles that way. Ask for Elder Constance. Tell her Declan sent you. They'll kill you. Maybe. But they'll have to kill me on my land, and I'm surprisingly difficult to kill. He glanced back at her. Besides, you asked me earlier why I saved you. This is why. Because mercy doesn't count if you only show it when it's convenient. Real mercy is the kind you show when it costs you something. Before Valkyria could respond, the war horn sounded again. Closer this time, maybe a quarter mile out. Declan stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The orc war party emerged from the tree line like a wall of green muscle and bad intentions. 7 of them, each one built like they bench-pressed bears for fun. War paint in red and black, weapons that had seen use and would see more. Led by an orc who had to be 7 feet tall if he was an inch, carrying a warhammer that looked like it could punch holes in mountains. They stopped 50 feet from the cabin, far enough to assess the situation, close enough to strike fast if needed. The leader stepped forward. I am Skarnak the Unyielding, war chief of the Iron Peak clan. We track a marked warrior, Valkyria Flintborn. She was left in these woods to die. We have reason to believe she may have survived, maybe in this area. His voice was surprisingly measured, not shouting, just stating facts. If you have seen her, speak now. If you have helped her, confess now. Honesty will be factored into judgment. Declan lowered his bow but didn't put it down. Judgment for what? Interfering with clan law. Not part of your clan, not subject to your law. You are when you harbor our marked. Skarnak's eyes were the color of old copper. Sharp, intelligent. This wasn't a mindless brute. This was a chess player who happened to have biceps the size of Declan's torso. The woman was sentenced to death by exposure. If she lives, the sentence is incomplete. If someone helped her live, that someone has broken our law. I'm sure you understand the position this puts us in. I understand you left someone to die in the woods. I understand I found her dying. I understand I didn't let her die. That's about the extent of my understanding. Then you confess to harboring her. I confess to not being a monster. If that's a crime in your culture needs work. One of the other orcs stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon. Skarnak raised a hand without looking back, and the orc stopped. Discipline. These weren't random raiders. These were trained warriors who followed orders. You're brave, Skarnak said. Stupid, but brave. I respect that. Which is why I'm offering you a choice that technically isn't in the law books but feels fair given circumstances. Hand over Valkyria. Walk away. Live your life. We'll consider your interference an act of ignorance rather than defiance. Or, he paused meaningfully, continue harboring her, and we'll consider you complicit. Which means you'll both face clan justice. And clan justice looks like what exactly? Trial by combat. You and her against 2 of my warriors. If you win, you both go free. If you lose, you both pay the price she was meant to pay. That's not a trial. That's an execution with extra steps. That's how orc law works. We believe in earning your survival, proving your worth. Words are wind. Weapons are truth. Skarnak tilted his head slightly. You helped her. Admirable. But help without willingness to fight for what you believe makes it shallow. So I'm asking, do you believe she deserves to live? Enough to fight for it? Inside the cabin, Declan could hear nothing. No movement, no sound. Valkyria was listening, waiting, letting him decide. He thought about the carved wooden rabbit in his pocket, about his daughter who never got to grow up, about his wife who never got to grow old, about 15 years spent running from pain by hiding in forests and silence, about the fact that at some point you had to decide. Was existing enough, or did living require you to stand for something, even when standing was hard? She's not your property, Declan said quietly. She's not your punishment to finish. She's a person who made a choice you didn't like. That doesn't give you the right to hunt her down like an animal. So you choose to fight. No, I choose to tell you to leave. Fighting is what happens if you don't. Skarnak smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who'd heard brave words before and watched them crumble under pressure. One human, one bow, one cabin, against 7 Iron Peak warriors. He spread his arms. The math isn't in your favor. Math never is. I do things anyway. The door behind Declan opened. Valkyria stepped out. She looked stronger than she had 2 weeks ago. Not fully recovered. That would take months, but no longer starving. No longer broken. No longer carrying the weight of accepting death. Enough, she said. Her voice carried across the clearing with the weight of someone used to being heard. This human owes you nothing. I owe you nothing. You sentenced me to death. I didn't die. That's not his fault. That's not his crime. That's your justice failing to stick because maybe, just maybe, your justice was wrong in the first place. You froze in battle, Skarnak said. 3 warriors died because of your cowardice. 3 warriors died because we were attacking innocent people for resources we didn't need. Valkyria's voice shook, not with fear but with anger that had been building for months. We weren't defending our clan. We weren't protecting our families. We were conquering because that's what we've always done. Because that's what honor means to us. Strength through violence. Worth through victory. And when I finally saw that for what it was, when I finally couldn't keep lying to myself that burning human homes made us noble warriors, you called it cowardice. But courage isn't blindly following orders. Courage is saying no when no is the right answer. The clearing went very quiet. You shame our ancestors, Skarnak said softly. Our ancestors were wrong. About a lot of things. And we'll keep being wrong if we never question what they taught us. Valkyria stepped forward, standing beside Declan. Not behind him. Beside him. Equal. This human saved my life when he had every reason to let me die. His family was killed by orcs. He could have walked away, could have let clan justice run its course, but he chose mercy instead of revenge. He chose to see me as a person instead of an enemy. That's not weakness. That's strength we don't even have a word for. Skarnak looked between them, human and orc, standing together, defending each other, an equation that didn't compute in orc war logic. If I let you walk away, he said slowly, I set a precedent. I tell every marked warrior that survival is possible. That our punishments are negotiable. That clan law bends if you find the right human to hide behind. Good, Valkyria said. Maybe clan law should bend. Maybe the world changes when we stop being so rigid we break. Skarnak's hand tightened on his warhammer. For a long moment, Declan thought this was it. Thought 7 orcs were about to learn whether mercy was worth dying for. Thought he was about to get an answer to a question he'd been avoiding for 15 years. Was he ready to stop just existing and start actually living, even if living meant dying for something that mattered? Then Skarnak lowered his weapon. You're both fools, he said, but there was something in his voice that wasn't entirely contempt. Maybe respect. Maybe exhaustion with a system that kept producing exiles and corpses. But you're right about one thing. The world is changing. Has been for a while. Some of us see it. Some of us can't afford to see it. Not yet. Not while the elders still control clan law. He turned to his warriors. We found nothing. The marked warrior is dead. Trail went cold. We returned to report failure. To Valkyria. You were Iron Peak once. Now you're nothing. No clan. No honor. No name among orcs. If we meet again, I will not be merciful twice. I don't need your mercy, Valkyria said. I don't need your honor. I just need you to leave. Skarnak nodded once. Then he and his war party melted back into the forest, horns silent, leaving behind only trampled grass and the ghost of what could have been violence. Declan and Valkyria stood there for a long time after they were gone, not speaking, just breathing, processing the fact that they were still alive. That mercy had survived one more day. Finally, Valkyria turned to him. You were ready to fight. For me. Seemed like the right thing to do. You could have died. Everybody dies. At least I would have died for something other than solitude and stubbornness. She laughed. A real laugh this time. The kind that came from relief and surprise and the sheer absurdity of being alive when dead seemed more likely. What do I do now? She asked. I can't go back. I can't stay here forever. I'm an orc with no clan in human territory. That's not a sustainable survival strategy. Declan thought about it. About the fact that his cabin had felt less empty with someone else in it. About the fact that for the first time in 15 years, he'd woken up and not immediately wished he hadn't. About the fact that maybe, Just maybe, living alone wasn't the same as living well. There's a village 5 miles east, he said. Elder Constance runs it. She's difficult, but fair. They might need another hunter, another pair of hands, someone who knows the forest. He paused. Someone who knows what it's like to be cast out and need a second chance. They'll never accept an orc. They didn't accept me either at first, took years. But Constance wore them down, made them see that solitary humans freezing to death in cabins was bad for everyone. He met her eyes. Besides, you won't be alone. I'll vouch for you. You barely know me. I know you froze when you saw a child in danger. I know you chose conscience over clan. I know you stood beside me when running would have been easier. That's enough. Valkyria looked at the forest, at the cabin, at this human who'd saved her life and then saved it again by standing against his own fear and hate, at the possibility of something that looked almost like hope but less dangerous, like the early stages of belonging. What about your solitude? She asked. Your 15 years of peaceful isolation? Declan reached into his pocket, pulled out the carved wooden rabbit, looked at it one more time. The tiny ears, the careful detail, the love carved into every line. Then he held it out to Valkyria. What's this? She asked, taking it carefully. A reminder that the past doesn't have to be a prison, that people we loved wouldn't want us to stop living, that mercy is worth the cost. He smiled slightly. It felt strange, smiling. He'd forgotten how. Keep it. Consider it a gift, or a promise, or whatever you need it to be. Valkyria stared at the wooden rabbit, then at Declan, then back at the rabbit. This meant something to you. It still does, but it means something different now. Used to be a chain. Now it's a key. He turned toward the cabin. Come on, let's pack supplies. If we're introducing you to Elder Constance, we need to prepare for approximately 3 hours of interrogation and judgment. She's very good at both. Declan, Valkyria said. He stopped. Thank you. For saving me. For standing with me. For giving me this. She held up the rabbit. I don't know how to repay. Don't, he interrupted. Don't make it transactional. You don't owe me. That's not how this works. Mercy without debt attached is the only kind that matters. She nodded, slow, understanding. They walked into the cabin together, human and orc, 2 exiles. 2 people who'd been left behind by their worlds and found each other in the in-between spaces. 2 survivors learning that surviving wasn't the same as living, and living required letting people in even when letting people in was terrifying. 6 months later, Valkyria was teaching young Derek, the blacksmith's apprentice from the village, how to track deer without spooking them. Derek was terrible at it, stammered through every question, but he kept trying, kept showing up, kept treating Valkyria like a person instead of a monster. Elder Constance had been exactly as difficult as promised. 3 hours of questions, 2 hours of debate with the village council, 1 very long speech about tolerance and necessity and the fact that winter was coming and they needed every hunter they could get. In the end, pragmatism won. It usually did. Some villagers still crossed the street when they saw Valkyria coming. Some still whispered. Some still believed orcs were inherently violent and accepting one was inviting disaster. But some didn't. Some brought food. Some asked about orc tracking techniques. Some let their children ask questions without fear. Change was slow, like water carving stone, imperceptible day by day, inevitable given time. Declan spent less time in the cabin, more time in the village, more time teaching Valkyria about human traditions, more time learning about orc culture beyond war and conquest, more time laughing, more time living instead of just existing. He still thought about his wife, about his daughter, about the life that ended in ash and silence, but the thoughts didn't hurt quite as much. The past was still there. It would always be there, but it wasn't a prison anymore. It was a foundation, something to build on instead of something to hide from. One evening, as snow began to fall in lazy spirals, Declan found Valkyria standing outside the cabin, wooden rabbit in her hands, watching the forest turn white. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes they're the ones who have every reason not to. And sometimes mercy looks like an angry human with an axe and a heart he pretended he didn't have. I had a heart," Declan protested mildly. "I just kept it in storage. You let me out of storage. Seemed like the right thing to do." Valkyria smiled, turned the wooden rabbit over in her hands. "You know what's strange? I spent 32 years being a warrior, being strong, being someone my clan could respect. And I was miserable. Now I'm a hunter in a human village. Clanless, honorless, everything I was trained to fear becoming. She looked at Declan. And I'm happy. How does that work? No idea, Declan said honestly. But I spent 15 years being alone, being safe, being someone who couldn't be hurt because I wouldn't let anyone close enough to hurt me. And I was miserable. Now I'm teaching humans and orcs that maybe we don't have to kill each other, that maybe cooperation is possible, that maybe the future doesn't have to look like the past. He smiled, still figuring out the specifics, but I'm happy too. They stood together in the falling snow. Two people who'd been broken by their worlds. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage. Two people learning that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to build something new despite it. The wooden rabbit sat between them, no longer a symbol of loss, now a symbol of what happens when you choose mercy over hate, when you choose to see people instead of enemies, when you choose to stand with someone even when standing is hard. In the village, lights flickered on as families gathered for evening meals. Humans and, slowly, carefully, one orc learning that belonging was possible. That home wasn't a place. It was people who chose to see you, who chose to stay, who chose to stand beside you when the world said you didn't deserve standing. Thank you, Valkyria said quietly. For everything. Don't thank me, Declan replied. Thank yourself for being brave enough to question, brave enough to change, brave enough to choose life when death would have been easier. We're both brave then. We're both fools, Declan corrected. But we're fools together, and that's better than being wise alone. The snow continued to fall, the forest continued to breathe. And two exiles, human and orc, continued to prove that mercy was the hardest kind of strength, that forgiveness was the deepest kind of courage, that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we'd never expect. And sometimes, when we're very lucky, we save them right back. Because in the end, survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most prepared. It's about being willing to see someone suffering and saying, not on my watch. Even when every instinct screams to walk away. Even when mercy costs something. Even when the world says enemies can't become family. Especially then. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that mercy is strength, that forgiveness is possible, that the past doesn't define the future unless we let it. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is offer kindness to someone the world says doesn't deserve it, because the world is often wrong about who deserves what.